everybody, Roger says hey. He's got a doughboy helmet on now. Anyway, we're back with part 3 of Prelude to World War I. Looks like this one's going to be covering the assassination of Archduke Ferdinand, which we've already covered in a lot more detail, I think, in the extra history videos. Try to remember the names of all of these channels. So it was covered pretty well, I think, in that series. It'll be interesting to see what Indy brings to it from his point of view. I'm really interested in how he's going to cover the assassination and if we learn, or I learn, any new information from it here. But before we do that, I do want to do comment time. I'm just going to highlight some of your comments from the previous part 2. If you don't want to watch this stuff, you can click on the reaction chapter in this video and go straight to that. But let's do comment time. First comment comes from Davros Lives. The issue you have with understanding all of this is that the history of Europe is old, complicated, and seldom taught outside of Europe itself. Probably very true. You are asking the right questions, but you'll find yourself torn between so many background stories that your head will spin. Trust me, I've done enough videos now on European history that I'm already there. The influence of the Ottoman Empire cannot be overstressed and will lead you down another rabbit hole. Pretty sure it will. I wish you well and truly enjoy your videos and the content you choose. Appreciate you watching, and thanks for the nice sentiments there at the end. I did not really, I think, fully realize just how complicated European history is until I started doing these videos. I mean, you get a sense of it sort of in school, but like when I first started this channel, I was like, man, I'm gonna like learn all of this stuff and become an expert in all of this, and now I'm kind of like, oh my gosh, I'm never ever going to finish learning any of this. It's just like overwhelming. I've already like learned way more in the last 6 months, you know, doing this channel than I feel like I did in a year's worth of school. Our second comment comes from Peter Smith. He says, in Western Europe, many historians would start the run-up to World War I with the unification of Germany. This is because it radically changed the balance of power. Bismarck went out of his way to avoid Germany appearing as a danger to Europe, but once Wilhelm II became Kaiser, war became almost certain. It was no longer as if there would be a war, but when it would start. I do need to go back and watch the Otto von Bismarck and the unification of Germany. I would agree that there's probably a lot actually, you know, that happened even besides that. Ottoman Empire stuff happened, you know, that kind of leads up to the Great War. You know, I think that's just the way history is, because what happens is built upon something that happened before, that happened before. It's just like a continuous story. Okay, comment number 3 is Mukra. He or she says, to add to the confusion, the people from that region are not called Celtics or Celtics, but Celts. Celtic is the adjective, so you have Celtic tribes, but you also want to speak about the people as just Celts. Okay, makes sense. I'll eventually get this right. Comment number 4 is Flying Eagle. Flying Eagle says the Ottoman Empire is definitely one of those things that is nearly entirely left out of the US education, except for its part in World War I. I would concur with that. That is a bit sad because its relationship with Europe is pretty important for the events that led the Europeans finding the New World. I can't comment on that because I don't know anything about that. You know, I have a feeling there's a lot of stuff that happened in Europe that kind of, you know, led up to the New World stuff that we're probably not taught. I don't know, like history is really complicated and really big, and I guess there's just no way to like learn all of it, so you have to kind of like pick and choose what you're gonna be, you know, like teach in school. And I think most countries are gonna kind of skew towards their own history or the history that affected them the most. In that sense, you know, I guess that makes sense why we don't learn as much about the Ottoman Empire, because it just didn't have that direct effect on us, maybe like it did with some other countries over in Europe. So anyway, appreciate all of your comments on part 2. We're gonna get into part 3 now. But before we jump into part 3, I just want to say I hope you guys are enjoying this video, and if you do enjoy my videos, make sure you subscribe and also hit that like button as well for me, okay? So let's go ahead and watch.
As any schoolboy or schoolgirl knows, the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand in Sarajevo, June 28, 1914, was the match that touched off the conflagration of World War I. My name is Indy Neidell, and this channel, The Great War, follows World War I week by week exactly 100 years later. First, I'd like to talk a little about Franz Ferdinand himself, so here's a very brief bio. He was born in 1863. one of Austria's 70 archdukes. It wasn't called Austria-Hungary yet. Now, he became very wealthy just before...
Wait, they had 70 archdukes? I thought an archduke was like the, I don't know what I thought it was, actually. I thought it was almost like the king or something of Austria, but there's 70 of them, so that's not right then. So I guess it's just like a high-ranking government official. I thought he was the only archduke. Wow.
70 archdukes. It wasn't called Austria-Hungary yet. Now, he became very wealthy just before he reached his teens, when his cousin died and he was chosen to inherit a vast estate. Another death in 1889 changed his destiny enormously, the suicide of his cousin, Crown Prince Rudolph. This left Ferdinand's father heir to the throne of Austria-Hungary, but he immediately renounced his position, leaving Franz Ferdinand next in line to rule the empire.
Okay, so he was the king, kind of. But he was called an archduke still?
He renounced his position, leaving Franz Ferdinand next in line to rule the empire. He was still in this position when he died, by which time Emperor Franz Joseph was 84 years old and Ferdinand was 50. Now, if you read pretty much any bio, long or short, on Franz Ferdinand, you'll discover that not a whole lot of people actually liked him. Well, except his wife, the Duchess Sophia. She was a Bohemian aristocrat, but without actual royal blood, so the imperial house made certain that neither Sophia nor any of her children could ever inherit the throne. This also meant they weren't much accepted by the Austrian aristocracy, in spite of his position as the next emperor, and a lot of people went out of their way to treat the Archduke and Duchess like crap. One other thing that every bio is sure to mention is Ferdinand's passion for hunting. He apparently recorded over 250,000 creatures killed in his 50 years on Earth. Now, I suppose that's really neither here nor there, but what is here and there are Franz Ferdinand's beliefs. He was very conservative and, let's just call it, unenlightened to be polite. He hated the Hungarians. He thought the Slavs were less than human, and he actually referred to Serbs as pigs. He was also very strongly Catholic, which carried with it the anti-Jewish, anti-Jesuit baggage of the times. He did love his wife, though, with a great passion, and the preservation of the Austrian Empire. And that is something we'll come back to in a few minutes. Before that, let's meet his assassin, Gavrilo Princip. Princip was a member of the Young Bosnians, one of several violent secret societies in the Balkans, and one who decided to kill Franz Ferdinand when he announced his June visit to Bosnia in March 1914. Okay, so in May, Princip and two associates went to Belgrade, Serbia, where they were provided with 4 pistols and 6 bombs by the Black Hand, and Princip had some shooting practice in a city park. Now, that's not especially relevant. I just thought I'd like to point out that people had shooting practice in city parks back then.
Well, that's true. It didn't sink in.
At the end of May, Princip and company took an 8-day journey to Sarajevo, planning to kill the Archduke. It's important to note here that the Austrian authorities and the Archduke himself were aware of the danger of some sort of murder attempt, since these sort of things were pretty commonplace in the empire, and especially in the Balkans. Now, here's a quote from Franz Ferdinand the day he began his journey to Sarajevo and his car overheated. "Our journey starts with an extremely promising omen. Here our car burns, and down there they will throw bombs at us." So, the evening before they were supposed to arrive in Sarajevo, right? Franz Ferdinand and Sophia surprised everyone by turning up early, just on impulse, and they had a really nice time wandering around the town, which was a pretty exotic place back then. And later that evening came one of the great foreshadowing moments of all time. A member of the Bosnian parliament who had urged Ferdinand and Sophia to cancel the whole trip for reasons of safety was presented to Sophia, and she said this: "Things do not always turn out the way you say they will. Wherever we have been, everyone, down to the last Serb, has greeted us with such great friendliness, politeness, and true warmth that we are very happy with our visit." Okay,
wait,
so
he thought that Serbians were pigs, so this is weird, kind of, that they're really happy with their visit, meeting all of these Serbs that they don't like.
far so good. But then the guy, whose name was Sunarik, answered this: "Your Highness, I pray to God that when I have the honor of meeting you again tomorrow night, you can repeat those words." Then they had a big banquet that night, and late the next morning, coincidentally their 14th wedding anniversary, the Archducal motorcade left Sarajevo station. No fewer than 7 young Bosnian hitmen were deployed on the town's bridges, one of which the Archduke had to cross. Now, one of the young Bosnians threw a bomb at the Archduke's car, but it bounced off his hood before it exploded, wounding 2 of the Archduke's men. The motorcade drove on to the town hall, and they listened to a bunch of the usual speeches. And then, after that, Franz Ferdinand changed his plans. He decided to visit the men who'd been hurt by the bomb to see if they were okay. So he wanted to go toward the hospital. But there was a lot of confusion over the new route and who'd been told what and who hadn't been told what. So when the Archduke's driver turned off the Apple key, the general sharing Ferdinand's car told the driver, no, back up and continue on Apple key. So the driver stopped the car because it had no functioning reverse gear, and he stopped it right next to where Gavrilo Princip was standing. So Princip raised his pistol and fired.
It had no reverse gear. How did they drive? Did you just have to like keep going and turn around somewhere back then?
To where Gavrilo Princip was standing. So Princip raised his pistol and fired twice from a distance of only a few feet away. Sophie died instantly, and Franz Ferdinand's last words were, "Sophie, Sophie, don't die. Stay alive for our children." Franz Ferdinand died shortly after. Now, it's pretty amazing when you think about it that this whole enterprise could have possibly succeeded. I mean, it was so incredibly amateurish, and had the Austrian authorities taken any precautions whatsoever, well, I mean, think about it. There are loads of people who think the Black Hand had more to do with it, but you'd think they'd plan a little better, or heck, plan at all. Anyhow, here were the immediate results. Word of the assassination spread instantly throughout Europe, and in Bosnia, by the end of July, more than 5,000 Serbs had been jailed, many of whom were later hanged when the war broke out. Princip was put in prison, being 27 days too young to receive the death penalty under Austrian law. Now, there were one or two European leaders who were seriously worried about the political consequences of the act, but most of Europe reacted by thinking it was more of the same. The usual Balkan business, another Balkan killing. There was very little mourning, even in Vienna, for the unloved Franz Ferdinand, and his funeral service only lasted 15 minutes. But there was one thing that became apparent only years later. You see, Princip, or the Serbs, or the Black Hand, or whoever you like to say was behind the killing, really got the wrong guy. Franz Ferdinand, for all his talk about Serbs being pigs, or Russian autocracy being a good model for the future, for all his backward and outdated beliefs, had strong opinions on two very important things. One, in contrast to most of the empire, he was absolutely against any war with Russia and stated repeatedly that he would do anything in his power to prevent it. And two, since he put the empire above his personal beliefs, and to make the empire work once again, he was sympathetic to the idea of making the bipartite state of Austria-Hungary into a tripartite state of Austria, Hungary, and a union of the Slavic peoples as the third part of the empire. So when a Serb killed Franz Ferdinand, it was a killing that was not only against Serbian interests, but since the Austrian Empire used the killing as a justification to invade Serbia, even if it meant war with Russia, Princip killed the one and only person in the empire who was determined and able to prevent that war, Franz Ferdinand.
All right, well, that last little bit was really interesting. I wonder if Princip was aware of those beliefs of Franz Ferdinand at all, or if he was just acting out of pure emotion. You know, sometimes you just act out of rashness of emotion because you're so angry at a certain situation that you don't really think through things sometimes. I wonder if that was the case with Princip. I mean, I feel like if he had known that, well, maybe he wouldn't have killed him. So I feel like there were a few things here or there that he kind of clarified that I don't feel like extra history kind of went into as much, but for the most part I feel like extra history really covered it pretty well and in more detail, I think, than that. But it was funny that Indy Neidell had the same reaction I did. It was like, why didn't you take more precautions? Which some of you guys answered that in the extra history videos of why that kind of was, and it just wasn't really kind of the mentality back in those days. It's all of these like what ifs, like, right? Like what if they hadn't done this, or what if they had done this? You know, what if they'd known this? And it's just crazy how human history unfolds. Well, that will do it for the prelude videos. We are up to the beginning of World War I. A lot of you guys left comments on my last video on how to go about doing this. I don't really know yet. I'm just gonna start doing the videos. If it gets to a point where I feel like I need to combine certain videos or skip certain ones, then I will do that. But for right now, I'm just gonna plow forward with one video at a time, and I think I'm going to do more than one a week just so that we're not dragging this out for 4.5 years. So there's at least that plan. Hope you guys enjoyed. Like I said at the beginning, like and subscribe if you haven't done that yet. Also check out the links to my social media, Discord, Patreon in the pinned comment and the description if you're interested in any of that stuff. Roger here, and I thank you guys for watching as always, and we will see you for the start of World War I next.